All right, team, the 5 tenets of Logic Pro. This is what I believe to be the foundation of this program. After working with thousands upon thousands of different individuals from different countries, I've been able to notate a couple of different impediments that befall any logic user that just gets started. Now, the way we're going to do this is we're just going to create an overview. So think of this like looking from a macro point of view at Logic Pro. We're just going to quickly touch on certain subjects, and then we're going to dedicate a video to each one of these topics so that you thoroughly understand and have the basics on lock. That's my goal. I want you to feel comfortable using this program, but in order to understand it, we have to understand what's underneath the hood. So let's start from the top. Okay, so I want you to think about something with me, okay? We're walking down the street, we're about to get in your car. The very first thing you do is you open the car, you sit down, grab your keys, and you put the keys in the ignition. Of course, if you have a push start, you push the button there and your car is up and running. You are ready to ride. Very same thing applies with Logic Pro. Every single time you enter the digital audio workstation, or DAW, you want to go into the preferences here and you want to enable your inputs and outputs. Let's say I was trying to record my microphone or a guitar. You can see my inputs are currently off, so there's nothing that I would be able to do to rectify this problem. In order to get this up and running, I have to enable my audio interface in this case in order to turn on the ignition. So let me go ahead and do that. And now I am officially ready to record this guitar or this hypothetical vocal. Let's move on to number 2. There's a concept in Logic, and again, we'll talk about more of this stuff in detail, but it's called key focus, and it's really fascinating. I'm going to go ahead and open up the mixer in Logic. Something to think about here is the fact that track number 1 is basically being mirrored by the channel strip inspector on the left-hand side here, which I'll highlight, and also within the mixer. So at the very top, you see a blue track. This is an audio track. More on that later. And if I hit the down arrow key, I am now focusing on track number 2, and that is a software instrument. So I want you to understand this relationship, this mirroring that occurs when we click on, in this case, a channel strip, a track, and that is being reflected in 3 different places: the track itself, the left channel strip inspector, and then within the mixer. So there's something called key focus, and this goes not just for channel strips, but let's say we are starting to record and you can see we have different regions on the screen. I can focus on this region. If I click on it, I can focus on that one. If I click on that. And so there's this concept with Logic where it basically is obeying your command. So in this case, I'm going to click on the green region. Now that one's in focus, and I'll click on this one, and now this blue region is in focus. So keep this in the back of your mind. More on this later. Let's move to number 3. So number 3 has to do with the laws of musical time. In other words, rhythm. If you don't have a basic understanding of rhythm, this is going to be really challenging. So I urge you to learn a little bit more about rhythm in correspondence with this class. I will talk about it a bit, but it really is outside the scope of what we're doing here. When we work with music, we're working with musical time. They work together. And so when we move these regions or MIDI events, as we'll talk about later again, you'll see that there's a very specific relationship in how we move all of this information. And so that has to do with musical time. So if there's one takeaway from this video, I really need you to learn musical time. This is something that you can learn in an afternoon, in an evening, if you just find the right material. So tied to that is how we move regions. We move regions according to musical time. So this is why you have to understand concepts such as bars, beats, divisions, and ticks. And when you conquer that, an entirely new world opens up with Logic Pro. Okay, and then the last thing that we will cover is something called latency. What ends up happening if your latency is off, essentially you will have a massive delay. So you'll try and record, let's say, a guitar or a singer, and they'll say the word hey, but you won't actually hear it back until like 10 seconds later or 5 seconds later. It's horrible. So I'm also going to teach you how to work with latency so that regardless of how good or how simple your computer setup is, we can have a nice workflow. So latency is critical. It is super important. We're going to cover everything in depth, but I need to clarify just a couple of things. What are we looking at exactly? Well, this is Logic's multi-window workflow. The very front here, we have what's called the tracks area. Some people refer to it as the arrangement window. This is the canvas that we paint on, so to speak. At the very top, we have the control bar, and the control bar basically handles all transport, play, rewind. You can use the icons to click on so you can activate certain features, or you can simply hit key commands as well. Now, one of the things that I'd like for you to do just to get started is take your mouse trackpad and just start to click on all the various icons up here. And I just want you to get familiar with where everything is, even if you don't know what it does yet. If you're the kind of person that really likes hands-on information, I highly recommend you click on the quick help button here so that every time you hover over something, you get a bit more data on what it is, what it does. So that could be very helpful. Now, this is going to be on the screen the whole time. You actually could hide it if you would like. I don't recommend it, but if you hover over the control bar, you can just click and drag up and hide it. Again, don't recommend it. The second part of the program, which is helpful, is called the toolbar. And if you click on that icon there, or you hit the key command Control Option Command T, I often tell my students 3 fingers T, then you get Logic's most often used key commands. You're brand new to the program. Maybe you're already doing a lot outside of this context. You don't want to remember a lot of stuff. Well, you don't have to, because Logic will remember the key commands that are most pertinent to your workflow. But we're not going to talk about these now. We're not even going to talk about customizing them now. Just know that this is a very valuable part of the program. Okay, so from the top, control bar, toolbar, tracks area. To the left of the tracks area, we have the track header, and here we contain all of the various tracks. Now, there's different track formats, which we will cover later, but for now, just understand that this is where they are contained. And as I open up the mixer, we get more relevant information to help us with our workflow. And if I hit the key command I, or the I up here, this stands for the inspector. And this is like your right hand when it comes to Logic Pro. It's going to help you climb a lot of different mountains and handle all sorts of different problems in the world of audio. So these are key subjects to look at: control bar, toolbar, the inspector, and then one more thing to cover, key command O. That's going to give you the Apple Loop browser. A little bit more on that later. So for your first assignment, I just want you to open up the program. I want you to visually look at the control bar, identify the toolbar, click on the various icons. I want you to open up the inspector by hitting the key command I. I want you to open up the Apple Loop browser by clicking on O or hitting that icon there. Open up the mixer by hitting X and identify the icon which that corresponds with. And that will be great. If our screens look a little bit different, don't worry about that. It's just because we're on different systems and I have this set up a little bit differently. So let's sum this video up. There are 5 tenets to Logic Pro. Learning these tenets, keeping them close at hand, will really help you understand and dominate the program. Let's look at the layout. Again, it's not that complicated once you break something down to its basic constituents. These diagrams are by my mentor, Edgar Rothermich, and as we've stated before, at the top we have the control bar, right below that we have the toolbar, on the left we have the inspector, on the right we have the Apple Loop browser, along with a couple of other features, not yet, and then at the very bottom we have the mixer, key command X. There's also a window on the left hand side called the library. We'll cover that on a later video as well. And so this is it, my friends. When we populate the main window, this is what we have. So my intention is just to show you the program so you can locate and identify every part of it, and then we will go from there. So one step at a time. Make sure you're taking physical notes, and I will catch you on the next one. All right.